Hey, Nancy, how are you?
Hi.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. Summer.
Wow. So some of you guys may notice that we're coming on early. I mean, we are ready to go. We have a big get tonight. Let's be
Mhm. Definitely. It's an honor to have him on.
absolutely. So tonight we'll be speaking with the state treasurer, Dale Folwell, who also sits on the state school board. So we're going to have some good questions for him. But before we do that, we wanted to get you guys kind of familiar with something called Leandro. So we're going to go over this before the treasurer gets here. So, what is Leandro? We're going to talk a little bit about that. Tonight. Let's see if I've got my thing correct. Nope, we're on another one. Okay, so what is Leandro? We've heard this before. If you've been listening to the left and they make it so loud and so difficult, it's hard not to be listening to the left, right? This is a spending plan that school boards and the state agreed to in 2021, meant to provide North Carolina public school students with a sound basic education, in particular, students that might come from low income communities. So here are the 7 tenets of what a sound basic education is as applicable to this plan. Number one, teacher development and recruitment. I don't think that that's too controversial, Nancy. We expect that, right?
Mhm.
Principal development and recruitment, improved finance system, better assistance, turnaround for low performing schools, expanded pre-K, ding, ding, ding. You and I have had so many problems with that. Alignment of high school, post-secondary education plans, all of that. So nothing in particular stands out. I think that's something we can all agree on. So here's what the courts say about the Leandro plan. 1.7 billion with a B, 1.7 billion agreed to on that. All right. Supreme Court, 1997, the court defined a sound basic education. All right. Here's what they said: it's ensuring that all students have sufficient skills, literacy, speech, math, science, allowing them to compete in a post secondary education plans in the workforce. By the way, that ain't happening. We've been talking about it for a long time. So this is defined as the bare minimum definition of what a sound basic education is, right? The court said that the General Assembly should determine any extras of sound basic education. Nancy, we've been saying this for what, a year and a half now or more. We've been saying this, that the social emotional learning that was done outside of the General Assembly, we had problems with that. So again, Supra comes in and says sound basic education. Let's expound on that a little bit. This requires 3 components. We can all agree on this: good teachers, qualified principals, and adequate resources. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. So let me just give you a couple of basics here about the plan. Okay. Some of the basics about the plan: teacher support. And here's how it's broken down. 61.7 mil for new teacher support program. A lot of us say, wow, we have a shortage of teachers. I think we think that some priority needs to be there, right? 41 mil for teaching fellows. We'll talk more about that program, the North Carolina Teaching Fellows, at another time. 30 mil for teacher preparation and residency programs, particularly in the rural and urban districts, which has a hard time with staffing. Again, these tenants are something that left, right, high income, we're all going to agree that this stuff needs to happen. So nothing revolutionary here. Equity with resources. This isn't the equity we've been talking about, guys. This means equity of resources, meaning that high income areas get the same as low income areas, or maybe even the lower income areas get a little bit more. I don't think we can disagree with that. The tax bases are different in each locale, so it makes sense that there's the things are being bifurcated based on need. All right, so 1.2 bill for disadvantaged and at-risk students. Again, non-controversial. You got 73 0.2 million. What's a 0.2 million between friends, right? Support professionals, which means, and Nancy, you and I have had our kettles boiling about this. Psychologists and nurses, different aspects of that are not great. Special education, low performing school turnaround. We don't mind these things. We've talked about, we don't mind these things. What we mind is a lack of accountability and a lack of transparency with respect to these programs. So learning barriers stemming from out of school issues, 65.5 mil, 19 mil for a regional support model. Again, we need transparency. We need to know, we want to know what the heck does this mean, right? Come on, DPI, can you show us something? Can you give us a little bit of a breakdown here? 3.9 mil for free lunches. I mean, look, this is a fact of the matter. We've got a tremendous amount of students living in low income areas, and that this is what they need. And TBD, this is a thing that gets me suspicious. This is where I put on my tinfoil hat. TBD, curriculum resources, wink, 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 from the DPI. Again, if we had more transparency and accountability, we would say, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And we've already had evidence showing that some of these curriculum resources are ideologically based, including based on critical race theory and other controversial paradigms, like with the contract with the Frank Porter Graham Institute, delivering CRT to training for teachers of disabled preschool kids. So yes, that definitely needs to be better defined and completely transparent for the taxpayers in the state.
Yeah, correct. I mean, transparency is the key, and transparency, it leads to more trust between the body politic and the politicians. And transparency, that's going to lead me into my introduction of our next guest. Well, let's be honest, our only guest and our most important guest we've had in a long while. So transparency is really the calling card and the bedrock of Dale Folwell, this treasurer, the state treasurer, who also again sits on our state board. I see that Dale is backstage, or Treasurer Folwell is backstage right now, but may not have his camera on yet. So if Treasurer, if you hear me, yes. All right. Wonderful. So Treasurer Folwell, he served in the North Carolina House of Representatives. I don't know if you guys know that, from 2005 to 2013. And he even served for a bit as Speaker Pro Tem. He sat on the Education Committee in 2009. He was first elected to Treasurer in 2016. So he's been at it for a little bit, and I'm going to bring him on right now. Mr. Treasurer, how are you?
Well, I'm joining you from a yoga studio, and it's 106 degrees in here. So if you see me wiping my brow, it's for good reason.
Well, listen, no one knows more. You've never met an interviewer in your life who knows more about yoga studios. I'm a certified yoga instructor. I've done fitness really for most of my life, and I had a yoga studio. Believe it or not, it was halfway in between Chapel Hill, UNC Chapel Hill, and Duke. And guess what? Everybody that was in that yoga studio, they loved me and respected me. And politics didn't have a darn thing to do with anything. That's the environment I love. Which, you are the most popular Republican right now. I want to give a little backstory on you. So in 2016, you got more votes. You were the most popular politician in 2016. You got more votes than Trump, and you got more votes than Cooper. Right now, you are the most popular Republican. You got more votes than the very popular Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, and you even got more votes than Trump. So what do you attribute your likability to?
Well, I've never been called likable, so we'll start there. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Great. It's great to be with you. The blood that runs through me is Quaker, and I don't know why this keeps doing this, but it's not. So hang on a minute. I'm trying to get centered, but somehow or another it's not working. The blood that runs through me is Quaker, and one of the spices of the Quaker religion, Nancy, is to be fair and just. And what that means to our citizens, especially those that teach, protect, and otherwise serve, is that there's no Republican, Democrat, unaffiliated, libertarian money at the Treasurer's office. There's no black, white, brown money at the Treasurer's office. There's no male, female money at the Treasurer's office. we focus on the green, GREEN. And by doing that, what that means to the folks who are a member of your organization is that we don't pick and choose which laws to apply or who to apply them to. We treat everyone fairly. And the other reason I would say, Sloan, is that I have to say no a lot. We manage one of the largest pools of public money in the entire world, It's nearly $250 billion. So to put this in context for your participants, that's nearly 10 times the size of the state budget. 10 times. And so when we succeed, everybody succeeds. When we fail, everybody fails. Of course, half the money that we manage is the pension plan. So what we do is, as I said earlier, is we focus on the green. We have to say no a lot, but every time that we say no, Sloan, we spell it KNOW. When we have to say no to someone for any reason, we let them know why we're saying it. And it comes down to the basic principle that I govern with, and that is that people just want to be spoken to like adults, and what they hear needs to make common sense. That's the only criteria that any voter in this state has, is they want to be spoken to like adults, and what they hear makes common sense. My reputation, and I'll close this out, is that I attack problems, not people. So where others sell rage, I sell results. Ever since I've been in public service, and you left off that I served 8 years on the Winston-Salem-Forsyth County Board of Education, and that's the 126th largest school system in the United States. When you attack problems and don't attack people, you're known for dealing with things that make a difference in people's lives. And ever since I've been in Raleigh, my focus has been on saving lives, saving money, and saving minds. Lives, minds, and money. And of course, a lot of that comes into play with one of my 21 duties and responsibilities is to sit on the state school board. Now, what do I mean by 21? Is I chair the Banking Commission. The Banking Commission regulates BBT and Truist and First Citizens, for example. I'm the sole fiduciary of the pension plan, which has nearly 1 out of 10 adult North Carolinians on it. I chair the State Health Plan and Pharmaceutical Board, which is the largest purchaser of health care and pharmaceuticals in North Carolina. I chair the Debt Affordability Commission, and we got some great news for your viewers today, and that is the state debt in an 8-year period. The state debt is going to fall 60%. Unless you lived when Calvin Coolidge lived, none of you have ever heard that come out of anyone's mouth at any level of government. And the reason I say that is that we just got designated last week by CNBC as being #1 in the United States for business activity, business certainty, and business outlook. Why should the folks that are part of your organization give a darn about that? Because the more upward mobility and the more joy of achievement and the busier people are, the more that the motion creates the emotion of activating their brain, being a parent, not just a father or a mother, and getting everybody moving in the same direction. So that's what I do as the keeper of the public purse. And I don't talk about this generally, but you can look it up. I normally, in addition to getting more votes than anyone who's ever run for president, I normally get outspent 6-1 because I've made a lot of people unhappy, especially in the last 6 years. What do I mean by that? When I first got elected, I got 64 Christmas cards. Last year, I got 5. I knew Nancy would laugh at that. Two of them, Nancy, were to deceased treasurers.
Okay. I'll send you one this year.
I only got 3. So that's sort of what we're working on. My job is spent, obviously, trying to break the healthcare cartel. Our pension plan is in great shape. You've heard the state debt's falling 60%. We're down 7% in our pension plan this fiscal year. Most people, whether you have a 401k or anything, would love to trade places with us. And when I say these things, I'm always pushing the power and the credit down to the hardworking people who work at our agency. So that's sort of what's going on. I just want to tell you that, obviously your organization has a mission. But the fact is that we're not all pulling in the same direction. There's so much broken about the processes in almost everything that I see. For example, on all the boards I chair, I think I have an opportunity for the public to speak to the ABLE board, to the retirement board, to the 401k board, to the state health plan board. I always have a public comment section. That's an example of something that I think needs to be addressed at the State Board of Education. I mean, not something that lasts 5 hours that gets volatile, but people should have an opportunity to take 2 minutes, say something positive or ask a particular question, and then somehow or another they get responded to. So we have a lot of bridge building to do in that respect. The other thing I wanted to say, and I'm not saying this just because the two of you and others may be on the call, what COVID has taught us is something that I've known all of my life, and society should have realized even more deeply, and that is the role and the importance of women in our society. My mentor for the last 35 years has been Warren Buffett, and he has this saying, I'm going to clean it up a little bit. It was in his annual report. You can read it for yourself about 31 years ago. He says, you can't tell what kind of bathing suit people have on until the tide goes out. When COVID hit our society, the tide went out. Our citizens were facing the highest levels of food, job, education, and health insecurity and uncertainty, the highest levels in the history of our state. If you want to know why I don't get many Christmas cards, just for example, I've been trying to convene the Council of State ever since April or May of 2020. It's important for all of you to know that I was one of the early contractors of COVID. My wife sometimes accuses me of talking as if I'm a doctor. My initials are Dr. Folwell. That's about as close as I'm ever going to get to be calling a doctor. But I do know, Sloan, that when your blood ox level is 82, while you're consuming 8 liters of oxygen, you're not long for this world. But for the grace of God and good healthcare workers, I was able to pull out of that. But my point of bringing that is not to bring my personal health to your attention, is that in the famous words of the country music singer Jamie Johnson, I've seen COVID in living color. I know what it's like for that ventilator to come back and forth in front of my room 3 times over a 36-hour period. And I can tell you certifiably, if I had not fought from being ventilated, I would not be standing here today. Because that's what they were doing to people in March of 20. This is March of 20, not 21, March of 20. So let me fast forward through this about the Council of State. Why should you care about that? The reason you should care is that, the Council of State has the Agriculture Commissioner on it. Now, the Agriculture Commissioner, just like that, overnight, when the governor shut down the economy, was faced with a distribution system where 50% of the food was going to restaurants and 50% of the food was going to grocery stores. That had to change overnight because there's no restaurants open. And that's why we had so many piglets killed, so many small turkeys killed, and so many hogs killed, because the distribution system just got all messed up. So you would think convening the Council of State to hear from the Agriculture Commissioner, who controls the biggest part of North Carolina's economy, which drives the funding for public education, would be important. Hearing from the Superintendent of Public Instruction about how we're going to open schools, important. Or hearing from, the finance officer of the state about what's going on with the finances is important. But I had to really work, and only when I started Facebooking live the Council of State meetings did the governor finally consider convening us back in public. And sometimes I get a little bit snarky, and this was my snarky comment. If we can put 25 school children on a school bus, we can sure as hell figure out how to put 10 people in a room that has 3,000 square feet. this is the kind of logic that I try to use. So that was a really long answer to your question, but that's just some of the things I do as the keeper of your public purse. I also sit on the community college board, vital to our economy.
Well, I forgot what the question was, but that doesn't matter. All right. So it doesn't matter. So got the answer that I was looking for. So to your point about transparency, I just wanted to bring this up to you. Let's see if I can get this up here and we can see it. Let's see. I think, let's see. We should share screen. Okay. Nope. All right. So our mission or our motto around here is transparency is for the government and privacy is for the citizen. And so we take that very seriously. And it really, it kind of pushes us on to do what we do, to expose things and to raise questions. So I'm glad, again, that you're coming on to answer some of these questions. Look.
Hey, Sloan, I'm going to interrupt you, which I don't get a chance to do very often.
I know.
Thank you. I want to be very clear. There can only be one governor at a time. And whether we like that person or not, or like the party they're from, that's not important. What's important is there can only be one governor at a time. And if the governor decides that for health reasons, the council of state doesn't need to be in one room, that's fine. But at least broadcast it. At least report the votes. At least be transparent about the business that's coming before the council of state regarding these important matters that I just discussed. So I want to be very clear about that. And secondly, to your point, I know you were talking about Leandro as we were leading in. I mean, these are very, very important topics. And I think that we deserved as a council of state to have what I call a toothbrush meeting. A toothbrush meeting is when you bring your toothbrush because you don't know when you're going to leave the room. I think when it comes to the educational uncertainty, the health, the food, and the economic uncertainty that our people were facing, we deserve to have hour over hour over hour council of state meetings to vet and transparently talk about these important issues. But getting back to the role of women, when the tide went out of COVID, the only glue that was keeping our society and our economy together were women. Whether it was as mothers, as teachers, as nurturers, as people who had to keep everybody calm when they were scared out of their wits. So what COVID has done is positively put a spotlight on the role of women in our society.
Well, thank you for that. As women and moms and nurses and teachers at times, right, Nancy? Right. We kind of came to that. So getting back to Leandro, last fall, Judge Lee ordered that 1.7 billion with a B be immediately discharged from the Treasury and shifted to the DPI for deployment in this Leandro plan or this comprehensive plan, this fix. You came out, you disagreed with this. Just briefly, tell us why you disagree. I think I know why, but you tell us your reasoning. Why did you come out and say, look, no, not going for this, not going to work?
As the keeper of the public purse, as I said earlier, I don't pick and choose which laws to apply or who to apply them to or which constitution to follow. I put my left hand on the Bible and raise my right hand to uphold the Constitution and laws of North Carolina. And the Constitution of North Carolina clearly says that the treasurer should not pay out any money unless it's directly and appropriated by the General Assembly. And even the famous Judge Howie Manning, who's sort of been the umbrella and the shepherd over the Leandro decision for nearly a quarter of a century, even he came out and said this was wrong. So we got sued. The Treasurer's Office and the State Controller, Linda Combs, got sued. We agreed that we would not pay out money unless it was appropriated by the General Assembly, and we haven't. More importantly, Dr. Linda Combs is now retired. She's been gone now for 6 weeks. And
excuse me. So Linda Combs was appointed by Pat McCrory, and she was the comptroller, correct?
Yes. So okay. She writes the checks. I clear them, so to speak. She writes them. I make sure the money's there to pay it. But we were both sued, and which is ironic because I don't write the checks. So they even had me in the lawsuit incorrectly. And initially, the judge actually kicked me out of the lawsuit, but then they put me back in. So Dr. Linda Combs has now been replaced by Nels Roseland. And there's a brief that it either is going to be filed or has been filed on Leandro on behalf of the comptroller, the new controller of North Carolina, appointed by Cooper. And I don't want to paraphrase it because it's very important when you're talking to groups like yours that they rely on what I say. But there's a possibility in that briefing that it says that if the judge orders the controller to pay out money without it being appropriated by the General Assembly, then everybody who works at that office, if they're held in contempt, they're all going to go to, it's fine. He is not going to do anything that's illegal or unconstitutional.
Okay. So you know who agrees with you, Mr. Treasurer? Let me show you who agrees with you. This is a left-wing group. What you're looking at is a publication made before this kerfuffle and this lawsuit came about over this Leandro distribution. This is a screenshot from Every Child NC, one of the left-wing education groups here in North Carolina. They agree with you in this. I don't know if you can read it, but it says, look, North Carolina General Assembly is the body most directly responsible for school funding and policy. So the left agrees with you. They understand what's in the Constitution. They interpret it just as we do. They understand that appropriations, it comes from, under our state constitution, it actually comes from the General Assembly, not from the court. You know, the left is very commonly, they like to use the courts to circumvent the people and to legislate from the bench. And this judicial activism, as you pointed out, Judge Manning wasn't having any of it. I think what he detests the most is judicial activism subverting our democracy. And so I definitely applaud him for that. And I applaud you for standing strong and for saying, look, you know, it's pretty simple here, guys. We take our marching orders from the Constitution. We follow the Constitution, not an activist judge. And getting back to the transparency, you know, we've spoken about the frustration, and I know that you've heard it. You're sitting on the state board. One of the most irksome things for our organization, whether it's our board or our top line members, is that when we have changes in the standards, we've seen this social studies standards was about 20 months ago. Now we're seeing the same thing with the health and science standards that are coming down the pipe. From the Department of Public Instruction, there has been two things. Well, the main thing lacking, it's been transparency. In other words, who is selected to revise these standards, right? There's a commission of teachers. How are they selected? What's the process? How many applied? What's the overview? What can we expect? What's going on? And I think that I can speak for a lot of schools. I've talked to the principals. I've talked to the teachers. They often don't know what the heck is going to be in these standards. And then they have to scramble to put the resources together to make the curriculum. So I think the transparency issue, I think if the three of us got together, took a vote, that would be the number one issue. But back to the standards. So the standards, we do know Ellen Essick out of the Department of Public Instruction. We know her prior work. She is, of course, the one from the Department of Public Instruction charged with selecting the experts that are going to be writing the curriculum, ferreting all the information. In other words, you know, cultivating all the information that will be used to create the standards. She is a self-described LGBTQ activist. Nancy is going to show you some slides in a few. Parents are if I said concerned, it would be putting it mildly. Having an activist, a self-proclaimed activist, in charge of writing these sex ed standards, they're a little uneasy about this. What can the state board do? I know that Olivia Oxendine has tried to institute some transparency measures. What can the state board do to talk the superintendent into being a bit more transparent with these standards?
Great question. And I want to tell you that I don't want to get emotional about this because I have so much responsibility as the keeper of your public purse, sit with 21 major duties.
Parents are emotional about this.
But I just want to say that I stand on the shoulders of Olivia Oxendine all the time. Now, I often kid her that we're only 11 feet tall when I'm standing, but she gets a kick out of that. But
she's a pretty tiny woman, Treasurer. I have to defend this because we're exactly the same height.
Powerful.
We're exactly the same height, Olivia and I.
Yeah. So my point of saying that to you is that, and I also want to say that, people's, their personal sexual preferences is really none of my business. What is my business is that if we are on the path of indoctrination and not education.
Right.
And so that is our business, is to make sure that we're educating people and not indoctrinating people on any issue of any way, shape, or form. And, that's the blood that runs through me as a Quaker. So, Olivia is the one that she's the brains on so many of these issues.
And the beauty.
Yes, but all the above. But my point of saying that to you is that Governor Martin always tells us, Nancy, that doing right's rarely wrong. And you don't need a law to tell you what's right and wrong all the time. And there's nothing wrong about having transparency in these standards, transparency in the process, transparency on when the committees meet. And I think that all of us from all sides can do a better job of working together to accomplish that. Because as you know, that anytime it comes to serious issues like this, they're not revolutions where all of a sudden you got this standard. These things evolve. And I think that's where we can do a much better job of working together. But we can't work together on any topic if we get too far out in front of each other, or we overshare, or we're not trustworthy. Many of you know that I've been racing motorcycles 46 years. And when I'm racing motorcycles through the woods, there's nearly 600 riders on the track at one time. Some of them are 70 years old, and some of them are 65 years old, and some of them are 14 years old. And my point of saying that is when you're racing through the woods for 2 hours, somebody will pass you. And when they pass you, there's three things that are going to happen there. One is that you're going to pick up your pace. But when they pass you and they go around a couple of trees and you can't see them, you get deflated. And then when you can no longer hear their motorcycle, you get deflated. And then when you can't smell the two-stroke exhaust off their motorcycle, you get more deflated, like there's no way I'm going to be able to catch up. So I think as we talk about the process and talk about partnering, we all have to take a breath and do a better job of not getting too far out in front of each other. I think that's what's going to make this process a lot better going forward.
So another thing, sticking in the same vein of current events, something that just is up in the news that everyone's talking about, and with the standards, is that there's a tie-in for this recent case. Nancy's going to ask you a few questions about the state health plan. You are in a lawsuit with the state health plan, and Nancy, take it away. You've got a few key questions while I put up the slide about this, if you could.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting, Mr. Folwell, and thanks for talking with us today. In researching for this interview and thinking about what to ask, I came across this lawsuit that you're involved with the state health plan, and the exemption to pay for gender dysphoria treatments, such as hormone therapy and surgeries. And I started reading through some of the legal documents.
Sexual transition operations.
Right.
Yeah.
So I started reading through some of the legal documents on the Lambda Legal Foundation website. And what struck me isn't so much the question about adults in these decisions, but what struck me was 2 of the 5 plaintiffs were families of minors. So when the suit was filed in 2019 by 5 plaintiffs desiring that the state pay for their medically necessary sexual transition therapies, 2 of the 5 plaintiffs were families of minors. One was 12 at the time, And it seems like the other one might have been around the age of 16. And one of the plaintiff that was 16 did end up having a double mastectomy surgery. So this was something that I haven't read about in the media, that I haven't seen picked up by conservative media. When we think about healthcare coverage, a lot of times we're thinking about adults, and we aren't necessarily applying the idea that the state may be paying for children to undergo these surgeries, and the taxpayers are going to be beholden to paying for this. What do you think about all of this?
What I think is that let's talk about adults for a moment. Actually, let's talk about kids for a moment. I want to be very clear that, and I don't know of an elegant way of saying this, we have always paid for gender dysphoria surgeries for newborns who have plumbing issues.
Right.
I know there's a better way of saying that that's more compassionate, but it's just the way I explain it. Mm-hmm. We've always paid for that. That's true yesterday. That's true today. It's true tomorrow. This came up because the previous treasurer, after I was elected, and I was not expected to be elected, who had 4 years to implement the payment of these types of sex transition operations under Obamacare and the mandates, between November when I was elected and she left office on December 31st, she got the state board of the state health plan board to start paying for this benefit. I've said this once and I'll say it again. This is an example of somebody shirking their responsibility because she didn't pass it forever. She put this policy in place for 1 year and then it sunset. If she really believed in this issue, she would have put it in place for the entire length of time. So my point of telling you that is that we let the policy sunset. And it's about the board's authority to set benefits. We don't pay for hearing aids. We don't pay for any elective surgeries. And our job when we're dealing with one of the most bankrupt state health plans in the United States, even behind Illinois, we have to do the most good for the most number of people. That's what we should be setting benefits about. That's why 2.5 years ago, we eliminated all cost of insulin because of the vortex that people get in, especially hard-headed men like me, when they don't take care of themselves and they're not insulin adherent, it ends up costing them more. We try to do the most good for the most number of people. So this benefit sunset, we got sued. We got jointly sued. We and the UNC system were sued together. The Attorney General of this state, Josh Stein, came to our office and said, I'm going to represent the UNC system, but I'm not going to represent you, Treasurer. And he said that. I didn't know that when you put your left hand on the Bible and you raised your right hand to do your job in this state, that you got to pick and choose which job you want to do.
Right.
But that's exactly what happened. So we went out and got outside counsel. They got a judge that's very sympathetic. And all I've desired in this whole process is to have a jury trial in North Carolina for the people of this state, the taxpayers of this state, to try to decide if they want taxpayers paying for this elective procedure. Now, the plaintiffs, to be fair to them, the plaintiffs think that this is medical necessity. Mm-hmm. The battle between medical necessity and it being elective. So the judge ruled without a jury trial. We are appealing that to the Fourth Circuit. If we'll see what the outcome of the Fourth Circuit is, but it's very hard to run a program when a judge has basically taken over the operation of the program and decided what benefits to pay and what not to pay.
Right. Well, it's interesting. This case it's one thing to challenge whether ethically this is appropriate for adults to be paying for adults. But I do have a concern when they're including children in this, and children, under the age of 18 with a permanent physical surgical changes. And having gone through a surgery residency and becoming board certified in surgery, I can tell you that these mastectomies and vaginoplasties and surgeries of this type are challenging, are difficult, are painful. Even if you want to change your mind later with breast reconstruction, that can be a very, very painful surgery. These are life-changing operations, and the state will be potentially paying for kids to have this, which is unbelievable to me personally. But the connection to the education is also interesting, because we have examples of the state education system indoctrinating children with, for example, one of these cartoons, the flying gender unicorn, which I can say as a physician is medically incorrect. It was not developed by physicians. It was developed by people with doctorates in LGBTQ ideology. This was used in the governor's school last summer, officially. And it's also been presented by Dr. Ellen Essick in discussions with other educators as early as 2016. And when this was given as an assignment in governor's school, the summer residential gifted program to teenagers, it was taught as fact. It wasn't like, oh, this is what something going around social media. What do you think about it? It was, this is reality. This is fact. Your genitals at birth are under a spectrum, which isn't exactly medically accurate, and how these teachers feel like they can take on these complicated surgical issues and treatments that many medical physicians don't even want to take on is beyond me.
Nancy, let me pop in and just say, Treasurer, what you're looking at here, these are 4 slides created by Ellen Essick and given to teachers in school districts as early as 2015 and 2017, and even since. The woman now in charge of creating the new sex ed standards, creating the new health standards. As Nancy has pointed out, Nancy is a surgeon. She's pointed out, not only is it not medically, accurate, which is a point, it's indoctrination of the worst sort that can and will, and we know this because we've got testimony from hundreds that have gone through this. This will result in life-changing, life-altering, permanently damaging procedures in the future that quite possibly the state could pay for, right, Nancy?
Oh, yeah. Well, apparently, according to this judge, the state is responsible.
Let me add that, obviously, when we were going through all this in 2018, and so these folks came before us in the state health plan, and I treated them respectfully and with empathy. I mean, this is there's a lot of mental health going on here and issues, so to speak. But, we're currently in court. I've told you everything that I can tell you based on what's been, part of the public record. And I think I'm accurate in saying, because abortion just seems to be such a big topic right now, the state health plan has not paid for abortions in over a quarter of a century. So anyway,
yeah,
I'm gonna. Any other couple of more questions? I've got to do something at 7:45. Another.
You got it. So last question, Nancy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when you brought up UNC and AG Stein in regards to this case, because UNC now has a pediatric and adolescent clinic for gender wellness. On the pediatric UNC pediatric department diversity site, they have a link to a discussion that was given, or a talk that was given by this clinic in March earlier this year, where they specifically said, in dispelling myths about what they do and don't do, they said they do offer hormone therapy at UNC for adolescents or minors. They do not offer, or they will not offer, surgery for children less than 18. So I find it interesting that the state will supposedly pay for these transition surgeries for kids of employees less than 18, yet the state's UNC Pediatric and Adolescent Clinic won't do these surgeries for kids less than 18. So are we on a trajectory where theoretically, you've got transgender indoctrination at the state level in schools, creating customers, or immediately affirming kids who may have questions about their bodies that may be transitory, and then forcing doctors in UNC, for example, to have to do these surgeries, even if they don't necessarily want to. Are we on that path here in North Carolina?
I'm not sure. I mean, you would be a subject matter expert to answer that question. This whole entire lawsuit, this lawsuit could have been about hearing aids. It could have been about dental implants. It could have been about a host of different things, but obviously it's about sex transition operations. And, I got scolded for even using that term instead of gender dysphoria. I think that if I'm going to adhere to the policy of talking to people like adults, you have to use terms that they're generally familiar with. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're generally familiar with things like gender dysphoria. So, once again, we'll see how this goes in the court system. But ultimately, the reason that I had to start, that the board recently chose to start covering this benefit is that, the court was compelling us to do so.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time and fighting this lawsuit and considering appealing it. I do think there are some major ethical questions that parents and taxpayers of the state need to be aware of, considering that this includes children. Thank you for taking it on.
I want to tell you, the Washington Post told me a few months ago that my humor is well hidden. So, so I'm going to say something about doing the most good for the most number of people. Now, I'm a conservative, and the root word of conservative is to conserve. I'm also a liberal in the sense that the root word of liberal is to liberate, to set economically free, to give people through the magic of education, the joy of achievement and upward mobility in their life. When I was in 10th grade in high school, I inquired with a guidance counselor about taking an AP class. The person responded to me by saying, looking at your scores, we think you'd be better suited applying for a job bagging groceries at the A&P and not taking an AP class. So this virus of low expectations turned me into a blue collar worker, a motorcycle mechanic for 6 years, a garbage collector when I started rolling barrels in Winston-Salem and taking classes ultimately at Winston-Salem State and graduating from UNCG. So I know the magic of public education. My point is that we've just got to come to terms about what these terms mean. Conservative means to conserve. Liberal means to liberate and to set economically free. So my wife, who is angelic, she's somebody that is so beautiful. There's some things in life that are so beautiful they don't have to draw any attention to themselves. They just are. And she has a hearing issue, and it runs in all the Sexton girls. So this is my example of not being a conservative. So we paid $186 for a hearing test. And that hearing test came back and showed that the only octave of noise that she had difficulty hearing was my voice. That's true. She's a singer and a musician, and she's a tour guide at Old Salem, and she's a muddy sneaker. But we thought that was funny that the only octave of noise that she had most difficulty hearing was the one that I have. So that was my attempt at treasure humor, Nancy.
I get it.
That's good. You know what, Mr. Treasurer, just a little quicker to the punchline next time. Just saying. I'm You can razz me for that one later. All right. Well, thank you again. Get back to your next thing, and then our next interview will be we'll have a yoga off and see who can do the hold let's see, the crow pose the longest.
Well, I think it's smart to be in a yoga studio, in a hot yoga studio, because if you start sweating from the questions, it's disguised by
Nancy,
the yoga studio. So
That's right.
that was actually very brilliant.
Well,
absolutely.
I was anyway. I do headstands in the funniest places. So I did one in the Sears Tower last Monday
That's cool.
in the observation deck. So I'm just getting used in my age when my knees give out and I can no longer walk on my legs. I'm gonna have to learn to walk on my hands. So
Always be, you know what, Boy Scout motto: plan, prepare, and prosper.
good. How many participants do you have tonight?
184 live, just on one platform, and so usually that's times 3, and then we usually average about 2,000 within the first 24
Yeah,
hours.
usually it blows up within the first 24 hours,
Yes.
Well,
or
I just
dinner and that type of thing.
I just want to read one question I got is, as elected official, why not clean house instead of the status quo? And I
Good
want to
question.
tell you that every Democrat is not a bad employee and every Republican is not a terrific one.
You
Right.
know that.
And, we're in the check delivery business. We have trains to run. The chief investment officer of one of the largest pools of public money in the world worked for Treasurer Bowles, Treasurer Moore, Treasurer Kyle, and now me, because he's really good at what he does. And so I just wanted to address that one question that we got in anticipation of this presentation. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to attack problems, talk about what it means to attack problems and not attack people. And I appreciate that.
Absolutely, Treasurer. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh.
Oh.
All your listeners, viewers need to go to nctreasurer.com if they want to learn more about all this.
Yes.
Be sure to go to nccash.com. There are people who are members of your organization that have money sitting at the treasurer's office. We've just paid out $105 million in the last year. It's simply this, Sloan. It's where somebody tried to mail you a check that you did not receive or did not cash. It eventually has to be sheeted to the treasurer's office. Now, I don't use that word very often because I used to stutter, and if I say it too often, it comes out wrong, and you want to bite me back. But so they should go there and check their name, maiden, kids, parents. There's $1 million that belongs to churches. We just found $59,000 for an animal shelter today.
Awesome.
Millions of dollars sitting. There's $1 billion sitting there. It stays there forever. There's no charge to look up your name or your church name or your business name at nccash.com. There's no charge to hit claim and get what's owed you. And I know there may be a person or two on this call who lived in another state. Every state has the equivalent of nccash.com. So a valuable reason to join your Zoom tonight.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, Treasurer. Have a great rest of your evening. And we're going to stay on and chit chat.
Thanks.
All right. Have a good one. All right. So, great interview. I mean, we have a couple of things that you didn't get to ask, Nancy. I want to put that up. First, Rebecca, I want to try to answer this as best as possible. Your teacher, you're just told the DPI released Sarah 2.0 for math 3 through 8. I believe that's the EOG is what we're talking about. So if I mess this up, Rebecca, just kind of put in another comment. Oh, what does this mean? You actually don't know what that means. Okay. I believe it has something to do with the EOG because the 3 through 8, that designation does. For no apparent reason other than to stress teachers out, they rearranged the order of the curriculum again and the standards covered on each. And let me guess, Rebecca, without notice, right? Required check-ins prior to EOGs. It sucks. Not what you need. Yeah, I totally agree. So if you want to write in again and tell us a little bit more details, but look, Nancy, I mean, it shows an utter disrespect for teachers and administrators when you do things in the dark of the night and you don't explain things. You just heard the treasurer say communication is key, and he attributes that to his popularity level. Do you remember the PowerPoint debacle?
The PowerPoint debacle.
Wait a minute, not PowerPoint, Power School.
Oh yes, Power School. No, I mean this is the problem too with enlarging bureaucracies and enlarging the state, right? Is you have so many levels. It's like playing telephone. So you could be someone in charge of something saying we need to get this out, to XYZ. Then it goes through 4 layers and it gets lost, or someone decides not to do it or doesn't do their job. And there's a disconnect between all these layers of all of these bureaucrats. And I don't think that's obviously entirely the problem. I think the leadership should be doing a much better job. And I think with the treasurer's office, thank God we have someone there who is so transparent with detail, because, it's dollars and cents. But yeah, in my opinion, and I think you share this opinion, and we've discussed this before, the NCDPI has not been held accountable for transparency with their multi-million-dollar budgets and COVID relief by the General Assembly. And I think the General Assembly really needs to step in and take over.
They're getting pissed off. Tim, please tell me you're joking, right? So look, the General Assembly has had quite enough of not getting transparent, getting transparency from the DPI too. It's not just us. When we first started this venture 20 months ago, people were like, oh, you're so mean. You're so horrible. You're so terrible. Stop looking at the state level. Well, no, I will not stop looking at the state level. That's where the problem lies. Let's put this slide up one more time again so that everybody can see it. Look, this is a pretty good depiction of exactly how things are structured in this state. You've got the North Carolina General Assembly, and I want you to see this, guys. They're in charge of the lion's share, okay, of the budget. 65% of the budget of all the schools, that comes from the state, just 11% from the feds. Has a constitutional responsibility, ding, ding, for providing a system of public education that adequately serves every child. They set a majority of the policies, including learning standards and teacher pay scales. Now, the governor has the bully pulpit. The governor can veto a spending appropriation, things like that, but they really don't have any power. So what I just said, Nancy, is that the standard setting, really, the General Assembly is in charge of that. But of course, they delegate that duty. They delegated it to the State Board of Education. And so nothing pisses me off more when I go to your rank and file Republican and say, hey, what are you doing? What about these standards? What about these health standards? What the hell happened to social studies? And they'll tell you, oh, the State Board of Ed, they're responsible for that.
Yeah.
And then, no,
they don't even know. I mean, they don't even know who's on the State Board of Education. There was a meeting, the Committee of Education, K through 12 education or whatever, from the House, when they were discussing putting forth one of the bills. It might have been, I think it was the bill to consider an amendment to elect the State Board of Education instead of having them appointed by the governor. One person even admitted during that committee meeting that no one in the room could name the people on the State Board of Education.
Cannot make it up.
And this is from a subcommittee that specializes in K through 12 education in the General Assembly. And so hearing that, to me, as someone who has followed this for so long and listened to the State Board of Education meetings, and putting my faith in people we elect to represent us to take charge and oversee this, was mind-boggling, that they don't even know who's making these decisions that they aren't overseeing. It's really sad. Yeah.
So here's Patty. Never said, I think you say, never say, don't look at the state. Look at both state and local. It's not either game. In fact, DPI manual clearly states that the state is responsible for standards and the local school board is responsible for curriculum. Exactly what I want. The state is not responsible for curriculum. Patty, let me break this down to you. Here's a couple things you need to know. Let's take the health standards, for instance, for example. So right now it's a black box, Patty. Nobody knows, including teachers, including principals, even school board members, what the heck is going to come out of those health standards. Let's just say, and because this is a typical course of what happens, let's just say in September, right, the same month that that this is going to be released. The state board comes out, or the DPI comes out and says, voila, we've got the standards. And guess what? We're going to have those standards ready to roll out in 6 months. Well, guess what? Nobody, no district, no school board can get a team together to write that curriculum quickly enough. In other words, they don't have the resources to put the curriculum together. And so that's when they have third parties and they say, guess what? These third party vendors can do that. And then we're going to have LNS come in and train your curriculum writers to write the curriculum that goes along with the standards. That's number one, Patty. Number two, let me tell you what else. When you have EOGs, end of the year testing, and part of a school's evaluation is having high EOGs, I tell you what you're not going to do. You're not going to have a curriculum that veers too far off from what the state standards are. In other words, if the state standards are XYZ, I'm not going to write a curriculum that covers A, B, and C. So when the state releases these standards, I can guarantee you the curriculum is going to conform almost exactly to those standards, right?
Yeah, I mean, this has been said before with Common Core. I mean, those are supposedly a set of standards, but they definitely informed, what decisions the local school boards made. And so, yeah, it's separated technically. Yes, the local school boards choose the sex ed curriculum to meet the standards set by the state, and they have the right to choose. But the state, in writing these standards and choosing what words to emphasize and passing things like gender identity in the social studies standards, glossary, and including white privilege and stuff, are putting it into our state governance suggestions for what should be used in K through 12 education. So I think it's still, it's still very concerning because yes, technically it's correct. Standards are separate from curriculum, but they definitely inform the curriculum. So
yes, absolutely. So Dennis, when you say set by the state, what does that mean? Glad that you asked that question. So let's talk about the structure. So, and I'll explain the nomenclature as well. So the state for us means this: the governor, as we just showed, really didn't have a role in setting any of this. So the General Assembly has the authority to set the standards. What is the standard? It means the minimum amount of knowledge that needs to be covered, and it's blocked out to mean, okay, you're going to teach these 20 bullet points at this stage, that stage, that stage. So the General Assembly has delegated that to the bureaucrats, the unelected bureaucrats over at the state board. Now, the governor does appoint members to sit on that state board, right? So they say, okay, the DPI is going to make up these standards. Let me explain this. The State Board of Ed only meets once a month. The office responsible and that keeps things going is the Department of Public Instruction, headed by our superintendent, Catherine Truitt. So Catherine Truitt's team is the one that gets together and makes up this this body that writes those standards. So when we say the state in the Constitution means the General Assembly, but in practice it means the Department of Public Instruction, because that duty has been delegated. Now, the social studies standards, Nancy, you and I have studied this inside and out, that the social studies standards were written, I'm talking about so detailed, you would be damn hard pressed to have a curriculum team at any school go and be independent about what they want to teach children.
Yeah, well, if you have the rest of my PowerPoint, I kind of have an example of, if you're able to put it up, I don't know if you are, but I have an example of the state statute on sex and health education standards, okay, that say it starts in 7th grade and you have to talk about abstinence is the primary only guarantee.
Let's cue that up.
Yeah, I don't know if you can get there.
So hold on. I'm getting excited here. I hope I don't overly emit excitement. That I know not to you, but to our audience here. Okay. So
there's a way to tell people what we see when we're looking at this connection between General Assembly, State Board of Education, NCDPI, and then local curriculum.
Right. It's complex, but we're going to make it easier for you tonight. So really, the standards, Dennis and Patty, what happens is this: the standards as we have it now, it gives people teachers an out for teaching this gender queer theory garbage.
It gives them permission to do it.
It gives them permission to do whatever the hell they want. You're going to see that right now. So that the way that abstinence is taught, get this, the state constitution or the general statutes now, abstinence must be taught, but so much prevention. I'm going to show you what that gives us here, right? That gives us, and please, if you embarrass easily like I do.
Yeah, I'll read it out loud.
Turn your head.
Okay. So this is an actual,
You're going to read it. I'm not.
So this is an actual curriculum sent to us from Eastern North Carolina. From, you can see at the bottom, Making Proud Choices, which was part of a Duke Teen Health Sex Ed program. So this comes out of Duke. This is for middle school, okay? And in the statute, it says the reproductive health stuff can start in 7th grade. So this is in theory, in practice, this is what a school district in Eastern North Carolina chose as their curriculum. This was a chapter on condom use. And in the statute, even though it emphasizes that you have to teach from an abstinence standpoint and say abstinence is the best way to prevent STDs and HIV infection, it does say that the student needs to know, and this is in the 7th grade health standards, the student needs to be able to know and describe FDA-approved ways to prevent STDs and HIV. So then what does that translate to on a curriculum choice level? Well, in this Proud Choices curriculum, they already have a statement that says, if a person with a penis loses their erection, and then in the next paragraph, people with penises. People with penises is a gender neutral term, implying already transgender issues into 7th grade. So it's not males with penises, right? Which is who has penises. It's people with penises. So, and this is an actual curriculum for middle school about condom use. So there at the top, it says optional activity for middle school youth. So that proves that this is not necessarily for high school. This is for middle school. And then it asks these middle school youth, what do you think makes some people uncomfortable about using protection, such as external condoms, internal condoms, and dental dams? And then if you go to the next one, Sloan, can you go to the next one?
Yep.
They actually bully kids who are uncomfortable talking about being sexually active because they're not. So this one in the same Duke curriculum for middle school kids says to the teacher, remember that some of the young people may not be sexually active and that for them, this discussion may not make much sense. So if this is the case, ask questions that are a little less personal. You could ask, what do you think some people do to make condom use easier and more fun? Or imagine an advertisement for condoms and dental dams. So you're taking kids who do not necessarily want to be sexually active, who want to be abstinent, who don't feel comfortable discussing personal issues regarding sex because that's appropriate because they're in 7th grade. This isn't even high school. And telling them to imagine making up an advertisement for dental dams. And meanwhile, this stuff isn't, you have to search this stuff out.
Heather, I don't know what the hell it means either. And I don't want to know. Something tells me I don't want to know.
And they can justify it because they can say, well, we're teaching about, what the parent hears is, well, our curriculum teaches about HIV and STD prevention through condom use, which is in this health standards for 7th grade. And a parent's going to be like, okay, that makes sense. And you think that maybe the kid at most will be like, condoms have a certain percentage rate of preventing STDs. No, this is what they're getting in certain parts of Eastern North Carolina. So this is what we're saying in terms of, a trickle down effect where, a standard can say something and then inform the curriculum. And that curriculum, if it's run by activists, can go way beyond that standard, but justify it because of that standard.
Right.
So here, what you have at the state level is, oh no, we're saying that kids should be abstinent, but know that condoms prevent a certain percentage of STDs or whatever. But what gets translated in the 7th grade classroom is, even if you feel uncomfortable talking about this, and even if you're abstinent, please describe an advertisement about dental dams. Like, this is what our legislature, this is what our state board members, this is what they need to understand. Right. This is what they need to understand. Dale Folwell talked about defining terms and being very specific with terms with what people understand. This is what they need to see so they understand what's happening in these classrooms without parents knowing, unless they really seek it out and really try hard to get the information.
Yeah, right. And so the state board, more often than not, you guys, it gives people cover to teach this crap. And once again, Nancy, you pointed out this is a Duke program. Mm-hmm. So in other words, Duke wrote the curriculum. So here's what's going to happen. I bank money on it.
Oh, they didn't just write it. They promoted it. They went to these counties and said, we're going to give you this curriculum.
That's right. And so here's what happens is that the standards are released, right? That's the bare minimum of what you have to cover. And then Duke will come along and say to the school board, hey, guess what? You don't have to spend money. You don't have to spend time to get a curriculum committee together, school boards, because we've got one already ready. And guess what? The best part is it's already going to conform to the standards too. So if you think that Duke and others are not collaborating right now with the DPI, you are insane. Oh, yeah. And then the state school board or the local school board says, hey, Duke, great, free, even better. Thank you. And then you get this crap. Heather, let me tell you something, sister. If you think you're going to opt your kid out of SEL, think again, because it's in all 12 academic standards. Yes, indeed, all 12 academic standards. So there is not a class that you can opt your child out of. Now, something called comprehensive sex ed. That's what we are terrified that the state or the DPI is going to push down on us. Let me tell you what that means. It means that all 12 academic standards will have sex ed in them from K through 12. So that gender unicorn and that gender person bullcrap you saw, that will be infused in all of the classes. And that is what we're fighting for. This is insane. So you are insane, Tim. I know you're not talking to us. You know who's insane? I know you're not talking to us, because I can tell you who's insane. The people who think that we're going to take this sitting down and not saying anything. You know, the word on the street is Catherine Truitt resents very much that we don't trust her, Nancy, and Ellen Essick to come up with these standards in a way that it's not going to push sexual politics in school. Thank you, Tim. You meant, I know what you meant. I know what you meant. You meant anyone who thinks the parents are going to sit down is insane. Catherine Truitt, I'm hearing, is a little bit resentful of the fact that she's getting pressure. And her reaction is, well, what do you mean people don't trust us to get the standards right? Are you insane, you guys? We have got to stay on these people, Nancy.
Well, yeah. I mean, like we saw already with the social studies standards, the first attempt at the glossary that was presented by she and her team was heavily biased and, if not overtly, plagiarized. And they had to redo it. And that was one of the things that she was directly overseeing. And that's very disturbing to me. And a week after she promised that gender identity wouldn't be in the social studies standards to a Republican group in Orange County, she sat there saying she approved of every word in the social studies glossary standards, and gender identity and the other concerning terms were in there. So, you may think it's like a small issue or who cares, or the teachers, can ignore that. Yeah. But it also gives license for the activist teachers that have unfortunately inserted themselves to spend, a month on some of these radical issues and just be able to tell parents, well, I'm conforming to the standards, so that's why we try to focus on some of these details and make sure people understand what these details really mean in practicality and why they should be up in arms about it.
So we know already that Catherine Truitt doesn't give a damn about this stuff, as evidenced by her not doing anything about the governor's school. Look, thanks to you and your communication and working with Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, wish you were the governor, but Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, you uncovered and he relayed that, hey, the governor's school is rotten from stem to stern. Here we are taking the creme de la creme students in North Carolina, putting them for 5 weeks. You want to talk about a captive audience? 5 weeks. They got this gender indoctrination. They were being taught by an activist all about this gender unicorn crap.
Yeah, the person wasn't even a licensed teacher in North Carolina, right?
She's done nothing.
Yeah.
The governor's school is directly run by the DPI. She's done nothing except for tell us to shut up.
Yeah, well, that's the important case, again, why I like to emphasize the governor's school is because there is this difference of standards by the state and curriculum by local school boards. There's an easy shift of blame, right? Like the state can say, well, it's the local school boards doing this, or the school boards can say, well, the state didn't tell us to do this. And there's this shift of blame between the two, and the parents just get lost in between and manipulated. But the governor's school is the DPI.
That's right. And you know what? She's shifting blame to the local school boards. You and I have been going through this for a long, long time. She constantly says, we have nothing to do with it. Talk to your local school board. Well, I'm sorry. I'm not going to sit here and allow her to throw good school board members under the bus, blaming them. You see and understand now how the system works. And she wants to change the narrative on this. And so Heather wants to know if we win the governor's office. Let me tell you, I'm going to be cynical and say no. So let's say when we do the governor's office. Well, I mean, yeah, he's a governor on our side. He's not going to veto stuff, right? I mean, he's going to approve the budgets and he's going to use his bully pulpit. We definitely need that. But, you know, we've seen that for 20 years, the legislature has been controlled by Republicans, and under the Republicans, this has become in North Carolina the most, bar none, the most left-wing school system in the country. Why would I say that? Because in California, when they first started doing all this 2 years ago, you got critical race theory in high school and up. We were the first ones to start at K through 12 with these new social studies standards. In California, you can't change your official legal name and your official gender or biological sex on your school records until you're in college. Here, you can do it beginning in kindergarten through 12, thanks to Catherine Truitt. How do we replace Catherine Truitt? We give her an excellent, high-quality primary challenger. That's how.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, there are a lot of issues with the system we have set up in North Carolina, and there is a special legislative committee now that Representative Torbett runs to try to look into that setup, and some proposed bills and amendments have been run through some General Assembly committees to try to address those issues, and we're going to have to continue to push because you know, there was one really good bill, I think it was 755, that did ask for these schools to be proactive about transparency and informing the parents about medical issues in the school. And it was passed by the Republican Senate. And it was a good bill. And our leader in the House, Tim Moore, just shelved it because he didn't want to have to deal with a Cooper veto. When I'm like, why aren't these Republicans who are representing us, who are in charge of the education system, ultimately by the General Assembly, pushing really hard for these bills and putting Cooper on the record as being against common sense in education? What are we reading here?
Heather, you just blew my doors off. I would like to see that email. Can you please forward that to me and to
our? We need to know.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because until we got on their case, the DPI had stuff about January 6th insurrection coming from the Washington, D.C. school.
Well, they still have the BLM logo on some of their SEL resources.
Yeah, but of course, we're the problem. Tim, do you think she'll lose in the primary as an incumbent? Sure do. Yeah. So, we're going to close it up for tonight. So, I mean, you kind of, and by the way, I just want to tell you about a new direction we're going in. Just kind of leading us up to the midterms here. So, as you probably know, for the last couple of weeks, we've been giving a platform to various school board candidates across the state. We want to ask them some tough questions, and you're going to see my interview with Ro Larson coming out of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system. That'll be on Monday. We're going to have 3 candidates we're going to interview. And then we're going to do it live. We're going to, open up to questions. But we really want to know how, what are the policies? What are the ideas? Enough about the popularity contest. What are you going to do to get down to business to help make our schools better? So that's number 1. Number 2, we're going to come to you guys with very informative, kind of workshop themed, learning stuff, explainers, if you will, on things like we're talking about tonight. Who has power over what? The reason is we want you to be a more informed electorate. We want you to know exactly the right questions to ask, exactly where the responsibility lies. And we want you to make sure that you ask every candidate the tough questions. And if you don't know what's going on yourself, going to be hard to do that. So our goal over the next 8 weeks is to make the complex easily understood by everyone, because the people in power are banking on you being confused, not knowing where to go for the information, and accepting the preposterous excuse. Yeah, gosh, it's hard to know who to blame for all this. That's bull.
Yeah, you got to start really holding them accountable and not be intimidated. Knowledge is power. So the more, and have primary examples like we showed you tonight from the Make Proud Choices curriculum, and can put it in front of them and say, well, this is, what we're seeing, the more power you have. So that's, I think, Sloan, what you do so well is try to give people as many practical examples, to use, and continue pointing to it over and over and over and over again, and not let these officials try to intimidate or say things that that with your own gut is not quite right.
Yeah. Elizabeth, I couldn't be any more in agreement with you, but I'll tell you, we have to get people better educated. People understand SEL. They don't understand how we got here, who made the law, and they don't understand that we cannot get out from under it. In fact, a lot of folks running for school board, they're mistakenly saying, I'm going to cut SEL. You can't. What you can do is get 4 or 5 different school boards in different districts with the same lawyer to sue the hell out of the DPI. You can do that. It wouldn't be the DPI, actually. I don't know who they would sue. Maybe the state school board. I'm not really sure. I'm not a lawyer, so there you go. Yeah. But there are solutions. We are not going to be able to come up with solutions unless and until we all understand what the problem is, who is responsible, and where to go, and how to get solutions.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, have a great evening. Thank you very much for joining us this Thursday night. Have a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you back here again on Monday. We'll have Ro Larson, and then we're interviewing 2 more people. And I promise you we'll have an explainer. But I need you guys to write in. Tell us what you need to be explained, because we have the curse of knowledge around here, meaning we kind of know a lot about a lot that's going on, and we don't really know what people are struggling with to answer. So let us know, and we'll get something up and going to address these learning gaps that you may have.
Absolutely.
All right. Have a wonderful evening, guys. Bye-bye.